Hi guys, how are you getting on? Are you well? Are you looking forward to New Year? I personally am, because I'm always excited when we enter New Year and it's the 1st of January, and then we can start from afresh. We can start from clean slate, you know. We can make all those resolutions and then we fail them 1 month into the new year, don't we? I'm just messing with you guys. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about acceptance, which is very important, especially for those foreign English speakers who are struggling to come to terms with the fact that spoken English, and especially the standards of spoken English that you have to accept, are much lower than the average standards of a native English speaker. And they're so much more different from the language you would read in books and in literature and in novels, because it's a whole new ball game. First of all, let's begin with the fact that you're a struggling English speaker. I was years ago, and I still sometimes experience slight issues, you know, but I know an array of different fluency management techniques and methods that I use to get my fluency back on track whenever I feel the slightest drop in my confidence and my fluency. But anyway, the subject was about accepting the fact that you can't, especially if you're still in the early stages of working on your oral fluency, you cannot expect your language standards be the same as those of native English speakers. You have to accept the fact that your speech has to be very simple, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're going to come across as a less intelligent person if you speak in a very simple way, you know, but it's a fact that some people might find it very hard to come to terms with. And the only piece of advice I can give to you guys is that it just has to happen. You just have to accept the inevitable, you know. You can't possibly keep up with those standards that you witness among native English speakers in literature, you know. That language is sometimes actually quite unrealistic to achieve in everyday settings, even for native speakers, you know, especially when we talk about classic novels and classic literature, you know. It's fine to read that language, it's fine to understand that kind of English, but when you speak yourself, you kind of have to switch your mind, you have to switch standards, you have to look for the simplistic point of view, you have to change the perspective. And of course, accept the fact that simplicity doesn't necessarily mean lower standards as such. As Leonardo da Vinci has once notably said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, if I'm not mistaken, guys. You may want to correct me if that quote is not the exact same as the great artist and inventor and whatnot had said all those hundreds of years ago, but I completely agree. I concur with him, you know, and you see the word concur obviously is a little bit more sophisticated than the word agree, but there's nothing wrong with either of them, you know. If I can use the word concur, so be it, that's fine. If I say agree, and even if I didn't know what concur is, it doesn't make me less of a fluent English speaker, you see. The thing is, you have to come to terms with the fact. If you've been learning the English language in the traditional setting, in academic setting, and if you spent long years reading English fiction or novels or whatnot, the same way I did, right? And then you realize that the only way to improve your own spoken language is by starting speaking it. You have to start simple. Use simple vocabulary, use simple sentences, learn the most commonly used phrases, and don't think of yourself as an underachiever. Don't think of yourself in terms of, wow, I've read all these books, I've read all this literature, all these 1,000-page books like this one, New York, you know. Personally, I've read this one a couple of times, you know. you can't think in terms that you have to be able to resemble the same language in this literature, in this type of fiction. You can't possibly do that, you know. You have to speak. When you speak, it's kind of a brand new language. It's yours, you know. You have to be a creator constantly. You have to improvise it, and even though you will resemble language spoken and used by native English speakers, you know, because obviously you're going to speak by adopting naturally occurring speech patterns and natural means used in real life, you know, and where else to look than to native English speakers? What they speak on 99% of occasions is correct and is right, and actually one of the English harmony philosophy cornerstones is that making an odd mistake here and there is fine, and we have to forgive native speakers for sometimes speaking erroneously, you know, saying wrong things, and then those things become second nature, and then people don't even realize that they make mistakes, you know. We don't have to be judgmental the whole time. We have to lower the standards as such, actually, you know. Perfection is mission impossible. Perfection exists in the academic setting, and that's fine, you know, because some sort of standard has to be maintained, an ideal to aim for in a way, but you don't have to aim for it in real life, you know. It's fine to be an intellectual person, intelligent. It's fine to enjoy a nice piece of art, and a good book is like a piece of art, you know, and you enjoy it. And fair enough, and well done, guys. If you can read English fiction, I can. And judging by many comments on my YouTube channel, on my blog, and emails that I'm receiving from my customers, many of you are also enjoying English fiction of all sorts, you know. Here's another I read 6 or 7 years ago, Dude, Where's My Country? It's written by the famous journalist Michael Moore, right? And he's famous for the fact that he's speaking truth about many things that many Americans don't really agree with. About this one is particular about President Bush and all the wrong things and the bad things that his administration were doing back in the day, right? But why I actually pull this one out is because I was going to read something out of it, and then I was going to tell you that I personally wouldn't be able to say that particular thing the same way. So here we go. If CEOs whose behavior has raised questions of criminal wrongdoing weren't in business, they would be considered sociopaths, a psychoanalyst contends. So let's look at the verb, the very last verb, contends. Personally, I don't use that verb at all. It's not part of my own personal active vocabulary, you know, and because of that word alone, I wouldn't be capable of saying that thing the very same way, using the same words, you know. And of criminal wrongdoing, personally, I don't have this. It is a very valid English collocation, a natural speech pattern, criminal wrongdoing, but I wouldn't say this particular thing the same way. Criminal, I would paraphrase, I would use different language, I would say it in different words, you know, criminal wrongdoing. You see, the thing is, you can't really, if you're trying to force yourself to remember things, to think of a particular thing, most likely you will fail, because your brain just doesn't work like that. And that's another problem why you may find it difficult to speak the same way, is because you're kind of forcing yourself. You have a vague feeling of what that particular sentence might have been in the book, and then when you speak in real life, you kind of struggle to remember the exact wording, but you can't, and that's impossible. It's an impossibility. It's a contradiction. You want to speak that way, but you can't speak that way. But you just won't accept the fact that you just have to use your own language, simpler words, simpler vocabulary. And the very simple thing is, if you want to use that particular In this instance, the word combination was criminal wrongdoing. You have to repeat it. You have to memorize it. And that's the whole point of my English Harmony project and English Harmony system. You have to memorize those phrases. Use it. Criminal wrongdoing, and then come up with a couple of sample sentences on your own. Then use that phrase tomorrow, the day after, and there you go. Bingo. It's part of your active vocabulary. But just because you read it, and you have a vague recollection of what it might have sounded like, doesn't mean that you can use it. And guess what happens if you read 50 books like this? All those different speech patterns, they're all in your passive vocabulary, which means you can recognize them. But recognition doesn't necessarily mean ability to use that language, you know? And basically, that's what the whole thing is about. It's about your passive vocabulary, which is all this. This is all passive, and part of it obviously is in your active vocabulary, because you can speak an English language, you can say some things, you can say certain things, you know, but you can't speak the same way. It's natural, because this is passive, this is what you recognize. Passive equals recognition. But active means what you can speak, what you can say yourself. So now, when I'm speaking at the moment, I'm using my active vocabulary. And you have to accept, guys, you have to realize that these two things, there will never be the same. Your passive vocabulary, represented by different books, is always going to be bigger. It's much bigger than your active vocabulary. And the only way of enhancing, enriching your active vocabulary is speaking a lot. If you hold your literature in a very high regard, you may want to do spoken practice based on what you read. You can open a book and then read a chapter and read some paragraphs out loud and repeat them, go through them all over and over and over again, and that way you will imprint certain speech patterns into your mind, you know. And then a few hours later on, you have to try to kind of revisit that phraseology. You have to do some self practice in English and try to summarize what you read, you know, and use the same phrases. And if you can't really remember the exact phrases, go back and read them once more. Read them out loud. Your mouth has to work. Remember, guys, your mouth is your muscle. The same way bodybuilder uses his body to build his muscle, you have to use your mouth to build your active vocabulary, you know. And it's all part of my new product I'm actually working on at the moment, called Fluency Gym Coach. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. It's about making you understand, guys, that you can't hold on to these standards as your spoken English standards. They will be always higher, and to expect that one day you just have to speak the same way the authors have been writing and creating these pieces of literature, it's a little bit unrealistic, to say the least, guys. You have to accept, you know, that first of all, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Leonardo da Vinci said that, and I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that, you know. There's nothing wrong with speaking using simple vocabulary, simple sentences, and it's much more efficient, and you can be more confident and free when you speak using simple vocabulary than if you try to force yourself to remember things that you've been reading or hearing, and then you're going to constantly stutter and hesitate, and you'll be stuck for words because you will have this very high standard you want to achieve, you know, but you won't be able to. You're going to be reaching for it, and it'll cause all sorts of struggles and distress and lack of confidence and self-esteem, and basically you will never get rid of the feeling that you're a worthless English speaker, that you can't hack it, you can't handle it. The fluency is always escaping you, you know, and it's the same way I felt all those years ago when I was struggling with my fluency, you know. Basically, lower the standard, lower the expectation. You don't have to actually lower the standard as such. It's not as if you're you have to start speaking using slang like gangster slang and change your whole understanding of what the English language represents. You can still enjoy it, you know, but when it comes to speaking yourself, don't aim for it, you know, just do what's natural to you, you know, let it come out naturally. And if it's simple language, so be it. Accept it, embrace it, you know, rejoice in the feeling to be simple, you know what I mean? Actually, the whole world has become so much more complicated than it was 200-300 years ago, don't you agree? Back in the day, when there was no technology, just think about how much simpler vocabulary, English vocabulary was. If we take away all the technology-related terms, and we only leave the basic concepts that people back in the day had to be using, you know, I would say that the language becomes a whole lot simpler, you know. Still, many of the classic novels were written hundreds of years ago, so I'm not saying that that language was simple by default, you know. It's still very sophisticated, the way those authors would have created those pieces of literature, you know, but my point is that the world has become so complicated, and we just have to keep up with those standards to be part of the whole thing, you know, to be part of the game. But the thing is, you can still be simple and simplistic, and simple is not the same. Like, simplistic kind of implies, it carries the connotation that it's of a lower value, you know, of a lesser value. But simple is fine, simple is grand, simple is okay, simple, no problem, you know. Everyone speaks actually using simple language, even in informal meetings and even in president's speeches, you know. They don't use language as sophisticated as you may think, you know, because they have to come across as friendly, they have to be understood by most people, you know. And here's the thing, most people, it kind of implies people from all walks of life, and you may instantly think, okay, he has to lower his speech standards because he has to be understood by people from all social classes, including those who aren't really educated that well and all that. Forget about it. Please don't start thinking in terms of social classes and that some people are more or less intelligent and their language reflects that, and you are an intelligent person, for instance. I consider myself being intelligent as well, but it doesn't mean I can't speak simply, you know, if it helps my fluency and if it helps my ability to explain myself, you know, and same goes with you. Don't fall for the trap of stigmatizing. Actually, you're stigmatizing yourself, you know, because you're kind of saying to yourself, listen, I've been studying the English language for decades, and this is it, these are my standards, and I just cannot fall any lower, because then I would become less of a person, you know. I would be an underachiever. I would fall into the same category as low-educated or non-qualified workforce, and I'm just not like that type of person. So I will keep aiming for the unachievable, but I'm just not going to accept the fact that my English can be simple. But you have to do it, you know what I mean? You have to accept it. If you don't, you'll keep struggling for the rest of your life, probably. If you do, you can be so much more happier and more confident. I promise you. I've been there, I've done that. And if you analyze my whole speech now, it's been going on for probably way too long, guys, but my vocabulary, personally, is quite simple. I speak in a friendly way. I don't try to use very sophisticated language, and for a good reason, you know. I believe that simplicity is a good thing when it comes to speaking with other people, you know, and speaking with yourself as well, because if you're anything serious about your spoken English fluency, you're going to be doing a lot of self-practice. And if, as I said, if you're aiming for very high standards and use a lot of sophisticated language, you'll be constantly struggling, because it's difficult to maintain those high standards when you speak, you know. That's my belief, guys, and you may not agree. It's up to you, but I'm just telling you, You're just gonna make your life so much easier if you accept the fact that your spoken language, your spoken English is a completely different story. It's not literature, it's a different thing. You know, when you speak, you are using your English, and if it's simple, so be it. Okay, guys, it's been going on for way too long. I'm gonna turn the camera off and see you soon in another video episode. Bye bye.